carrying mass, how could the mass go down in a human being but not in an animal if we're all carbon, if we're all oxygenated carbon life forms?
I guess I would have to see the data on that.
Given its truth, and I don't have the data either, but if it's true, what does that say to you?
Well, first of all, I mean, it all hinges on whether or not it's true.
Right.
And I'm very skeptical that the spirit that we are, the spiritual entity that we are that is inhabiting this body that we live in, whether that has any physical existence that can be measured in terms of weight, I'm skeptical of that. I guess in this case too, I'd have to see the data before I take the notion seriously.
Francis is in the middle of Arizona somewhere on Coast to Coast AM for Dr. Bernard Haish. Francis?
Good morning. What is your idea of God? Do you have
It's an idea that's been elucidated by Kabbalah, the ancient Hindu traditions. God is, I think, a being beyond space, beyond time, simultaneously greater than infinity and less than zero, a being of perfect bliss, a being of perfect joy and love, but unimaginable in terms of what it is, because he is nothing. He is nothing and everything. That's how he is described in these traditions. But this God, I think, has infinite potential, and that potential is something that I think this being wants to realize, to experience. And so I think what this being does is to create universes like ours. Many of them, can be very different at Mars, I suppose, but some of his potential becomes actualized in those universes. And the point of that is that he can then enter into the life forms that arise and experience what it's like to have that potential. Experience is a very different thing than potential. One is sterile and one is active. And I think that's the whole point of what we're doing here, is we are God having an experience of physical reality, because that's one of God's potentials.
Mary is in Hollandale, Florida on Coast to Coast AM for Dr. Bernard Haish. Go ahead, Mary.
Good evening. I would like to find out if you or Ian, or do you know of any of the other hosts that have read the book Urantia, or have had a guest on explaining Urantia in the past since the program has been running?
I've seen the book. I've never read it.
Yeah, what's your point?
It's 1,083 pages. So much of what you think God is in that book, and a lot of the things that you're not sure about are also in that book. And I would really love for you to read it, and I would love for the program to have someone on from the Urantia Foundation, which is in Chicago. I can give you the number.
It's okay. We can find that
on the program.
I'm pretty sure we've done something with Urantia in the past. I haven't in my memory, but sometimes I look back over the list of guests that I've had, and I've forgotten some of the cool people we've had on. So I'll go back and look at it, but I'm pretty sure that that's been covered before. But if not, we'll take a look at it in the future. And Fernando is in El Paso on Coast to Coast AM. Fernando?
Dr. Haish, I have been studying these kinds of things just out of curiosity for about 40 years. And I agree with the conclusions that you have reached on everything you've mentioned. And there's one thing that puzzles me, though. I was raised in a traditional religion, and the concept of free will, and I believed in free will. I still do, but I had an experience one time that makes me question it. I went to the public library to get a specific book on sales. I was just getting into sales and wanted to learn more about it. As I was walking through the stacks back to that section, I noticed out of the corner of my eye, in passing, the title on the binding of a book. But I only had a brief time to get the book I went to get, so I wasn't interested in anything else. But my legs stopped. And this little knowing, sometimes almost like a voice within me, said, "Look at the book." And I silently answered back, and I said, I looked at it. I see the title. I'm not interested. I'm busy. I got to do something. I don't have time. And it said, take the book off the shelf. So I said, oh, all right. And I kept trying to move my feet, and they were just stuck to the floor. And so I picked the book up and looked in the dust cover where they have information about it, and nothing attracted my interest, and I tried to put it back on the shelf, and my arm froze in midair. And I said, I don't want it. I'm in a hurry. And the little voice said, check the book out. And just out of frustration, I said, oh, all right.
Right.
And I took it home with the other books I wanted. I read the other books, studied them, and then I took all the books back to the library, including this one that I hadn't even looked at.
Right.
I was standing at the checkout desk to check it in, and the little voice said, you didn't read that book. You still have a week time on it. And I said, okay.
Fernando, I'm so running out of time here, so I just want to get to the payoff of what was the book?
A Parenthesis in Eternity. That was my introduction to metaphysics.
Oh, very interesting.
But the question is, what about free will?
Okay. Dr. Hayes?
Well, I mean, I think you still have free will. You really could have not checked it out. You could have returned it. I think we tune into our creative consciousness, and we probably wind up telling ourselves things that we don't realize when we're just in our ordinary state, that we should know or could do. So I don't see this as any great objection to free will.
Well, we have time for one last thing, and I've saved this from last hour. I thought it was interesting. It was on the website that this goes back to a couple of things you talked about, that there's a website that's set up in Australia, and people can link up to it through coasttocoastam.com, that will be beaming messages that people leave of no more than 160 characters at the Canberra Deep Space Communication Complex and then you'll have to help me with this is how this is pronounced. Gliese?
Gliese.
What's Gliese?
Gliese, yeah. He was an astronomer, and certain stars are named after him because of a catalog he compiled. Gliese. So, Wilhelm Gliese was his name.
A catalog, here it says, of all of these messages will be beamed. A planet 8 times heavier than our own is located 20 light years away in the constellation Libra. Is Gliese a planet that is likely to contain life?
I don't know what the statistics, what the data on that planet are. Sorry.
That's okay. They say it's an Earth-like planet outside our solar system. I didn't know if you were familiar with it. All right. So if they receive this message in a bottle, right, cast out in the stars, what do you think they would send back to Earth? Dr. Hayes?
You're asking me to second guess the alien motivations in psychology and politics.
Yeah. What would they respond back to receiving this message in a bottle from Earth?
They could send the same message back to us. That's what was done in Contact. Remember when they got the message that was actually a television broadcast of the German Olympics in the 1930s?
Right.
That came back to us from Vega in the movie Contact.
So you think they just might say, stamp it received and send it back to us?
No, but that's the only thing I can think of saying at this hour of the night.
Well, okay, that's where we'll leave it. Dr. Bernard Hayes, thank you so much for entertaining all of our questions. And link up to him through coasttocoastam.com. Good luck on the digital universe. Look forward to hearing more about that in the future.
Thank you very much.
Everybody else, enjoy your week. Deus te amat, and I do too.